I was on my way to get roaring drunk from sheer embarrassment when Jordan Baker came out of the house and stood at the head of the marble steps, leaning a little backward and looking with contemptuous interest down into the garden. Welcome or not, I found it necessary to attach myself to someone before I should begin to address cordial remarks to the passerbys.
Hello!
I roared, advancing toward her. My voice seemed unnaturally loud across the garden.
I thought you might be here.
She responded absently as I came up.
I remember you live next to...
She held my hand impersonally as a promise that she'd take care of me in a minute and gave ear to two girls in twin yellow dresses who stopped at the foot of the steps.
Hello!
They cried together.
Sorry you didn't win.
That was for the golf tournament. She had lost in the finals the week before,
You don't know who we are,
said one of the girls in yellow.
but we met you here about a month ago.
You've dyed your hair since then.
Remarked Jordan, and I started, but the girls had moved casually on, and her remark was addressed to the premature moon, produced like the supper, no doubt, out of a caterer's basket. With Jordan's golden slender arm in mine, we descended the steps and sauntered about the garden.
Do you come to these parties often?
Inquired Jordan of the girl beside her.
Oh, yes, the last one was the one that we met you at.
Answered the girl in an alert, confident voice. She turned to her companion.
Wasn't it for you, Lucille?
It was for Lucille, too,
I like to come.
Lucille said.
I never care what I do, so I always have a good time. The last time I was here, I tore my dress on a chair, and he asked for my name and address. Inside of a week, I got a package from Clora's with a new evening gown in it.
Did you keep it?
Asked Jordan.
Sure, I did. I was going to wear it tonight, but it was too big in the bust and needed to be altered. It was gas blue with lavender beads. $265.
You know, there's something funny about a man that'll do a thing like that.
Said the other girl eagerly.
He doesn't want any trouble with anybody.
Who does it?
I inquired.
Gatsby! Somebody told me.
The two girls and Jordan leaned together confidentially.
Somebody told me that he killed a man once. A thrill passed over all of us. The three Mr. Mumbles bent forward and listened eagerly.
I don't think it's so much that.
Argued Lucille skeptically.
It's just that he was a German spy during the war.
One of the men nodded in confirmation.
I heard that from a man who knew all about him. Grew up with him in Germany.
He assured us positively.
No, that couldn't be it. He was in the American army during the war.
Said the first girl. As our credulity switched back to her, she leaned forward with enthusiasm.
You look at him sometimes when he thinks nobody's looking at him? I'll bet he killed a man.
She narrowed her eyes and shivered. Lucille shivered. We all turned around and looked around for Gatsby. It was testimony to the romantic speculation he inspired that there were whispers about him from those who had found little that it was necessary to whisper about in this world.
The first supper, there would be another one after midnight, was now being served, and Jordan invited me to join her own party, who was spread around the table on the other side of the garden. There were 3 married couples and Jordan's escort, a persistent undergraduate given to a violent innuendo and obviously under the impression that sooner or later Jordan was going to yield him up her person to a greater or lesser degree. Instead of rambling, this party had preserved a dignified homogeneity, and it assumed itself to the function of representing the staid nobility of the countryside. East Egg condescending to West Egg, and carefully guard around its spectroscopic gaiety.
Let's get out, whispered Jordan, after a somehow wasteful and inappropriate half hour.
This is much too polite for me.
We got up, and she explained that we were going to find the host. I had never met him, she said, and it was making me uneasy. The undergraduate nodded in a cynical, melancholy way. The bar where we glanced first was crowded, but Gatsby was not there. She couldn't find him from the top of the steps, and he wasn't on the veranda. On a chance, we tried an important-looking door and walked into a high, Gothic library paneled with carved English oak and probably transported complete from some ruin overseas. A stout, middle-aged man with enormous eye-light spectacles was sitting somewhat drunk on the edge of a great table, staring with unsteady concentration at the shelves of books. As we entered, he wheeled excitedly around and examined Jordan from head to foot.
What do you think?
He demanded impetuously.
About what?
He waved his hand toward the bookshelves.
About that. As a matter of fact, you needn't bother to ascertain. I ascertained. They're real.
The books?
He nodded.
Absolutely real. Have pages and everything. I thought they'd be a nice durable cardboard. As a matter of fact, they're absolutely real. Pages, and here, let me show you.
Taking our skepticism for granted, he rushed to the bookcases and returned with volume 1 of the Stoddard Lectures.
See?
He cried triumphantly.
It's a bona fide piece of printed matter. It fooled me. This fellow's a regular Belasco. It's a triumph. What thoroughness. What realism. He even knew when to stop. Didn't even cut the pages. What do you know? What do you expect?
He snatched the book from me and replaced it hastily on the shelf, muttering that if one brick was removed, the whole library was liable to collapse.
Who brought you?
He demanded.
Or did you just come? I was brought. Most people were brought.
Jordan looked at him alertly, cheerfully, without answering.
I was brought by a woman named Roosevelt.
He continued.
Mrs. Claude Roosevelt. Do you know her? I met her last night somewhere. I've been drunk for about a week now. I thought it'd sober me up to sit in a library.
Has it?
A little. I can't quite tell. It's only been an hour. Have I told you about the books? They're real. Absolutely.
You told us.
We shook hands with him gravely and went back outdoors.
There was dancing now on the canvas in the garden, old men pushing young girls backwards in eternal graceless circles, superior couples holding each other tortuously, fashionably, and keeping in the corners, and a great number of single girls dancing individualistically or relieving the orchestra for a moment of the burden of the banjo or the traps. By midnight the hilarity had increased. A celebrated tenor had sung in Italian, and a notorious contralto had sung in jazz, and between numbers people were doing stunts all over the garden, while happy vacuous bursts of laughter arose towards the summer sky. A pair of stage twins, who turned out to be the girls in yellow, did a baby act in costume, and champagne was served in glasses bigger than finger bowls. The moon had risen higher, and floating in the sound was a triangle of silver scales, trembling little to the stiff, tiny drip of the banjos on the lawn.
I was still with Jordan Baker. We were sitting at a table with a man of about my age and a rowdy little girl who gave away upon the slightest provocation to uncontrollable laughter. I was enjoying myself now. I had taken 2 finger bowls of champagne, and the scene had changed before my eyes into something significant, elemental, and profound. At a lonely entertainment, the man looked at me and smiled.
Your face is familiar.
He said politely.
Were you in the 3rd Division during the war?
Why, yes. I was in the 9th Machine Gun Battalion.
I was in the 7th Infantry until June 1918. I knew I'd seen you somewhere before.
We talked for a moment, but about some wet, gray little villages in France. Evidently, he lived in this vicinity, for he told me that he had just bought a hydroplane and is going to try it out in the morning.
Want to come with me, old sport? Just along the shore near the Sound?
What time?
Any time that suits you best.
It was on the tip of my tongue to ask him his name when Jordan looked around and smiled.
Having a gay time now.
She inquired.
Much better.
I turned again to my new acquaintance.
This party is unusual for me. I haven't met the host. I live over there.
I waved my hand at the invisible hedge in the distance.
This man Gatsby sent his chauffeur to give me an invitation.
For a moment, he looked at me as if he failed to understand.
I'm Gatsby.
He said suddenly.
What?
I exclaimed.
I beg your pardon.
I thought you knew, old sport. I'm afraid I'm not a very good host.
He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole external world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that, at your best, you would hope to convey. Precisely at this point it vanished, and I was looking at an elegant young roughneck, a year or two over 30, whose elaborate formality of speech just missed being absurd. Some time before he introduced himself, I got a strong impression that he was picking his words with care.
Almost at the moment when Mr. Gatsby identified himself, a butler hurried toward him with the information that Chicago was calling him on the wire. He excused himself with a small bow that included each of us in turn.
If you want anything, just ask for it, old sport.
He urged me.
Excuse me. I will rejoin you later.